Hi, my name is Arti. I'm coming from India. I set up and run a community radio station called Gurgaon ki Awaaz Samudayak Radio in Gurgaon, which is a suburb of India's capital city, New Delhi. So that was in 2009, and since then the community radio has been my world. So the community radio network in India is about 22 years old. The early licenses in 2002, 2003 were given to educational institutions, universities, and it was not open to civil society. Then after a lot of activism, a policy change came about in 2006 in which licenses were opened up to civil society organizations as well as agricultural institutions, which are called Krishi Vigyan Kendras, which are extension education for farmers through government institutions. And since 2006 there has been a rise in the number of civil society organizations that are setting up and running community radio stations, and as of today we have about 500 community radio stations in India spread across. So there are three types of ownership. One is an educational institution, a university or a college or a school which can apply for a license. The other is a agricultural extension awareness kind of organization which are 100% government funded. The third is civil society. So there are NGOs and trusts that can apply for a license, and they are really even at the application stage they are clearly mentioning the community they are addressing. So they are supposed to show proof of that, and so there is a difference. Educational institutions typically mention their students as their audience, agricultural units mention farmers and their families as their audience, but their primary focus is awareness about agricultural practices, and NGOs offer the community as a. The registration process is fairly cumbersome because there is a fair amount of paperwork. You have different ministries scrutinizing your application, you have the government agencies visiting your area, your organization to vet it. So it does take time. I'd say optimistically 1 year from the start. You need to be an organization, and I'm only going to talk about NGOs and non-profits right now because educational institutions are mostly fairly established. NGOs need to have a history of 3 years of working in the community and being able to show proof of that work. You need to apply, then you need to apply to another organization for a license for spectrum. So initially you need to wait for them to give a go ahead, saying yes, in principle we will give you the license, which is called a letter of intent. Once you get that in principle nod, that means the intelligence agencies didn't find anything shady about you, then you start the other process of applying for spectrum, and you give your location, you start doing a survey, that kind of thing, and also just setting up the radio station. The spectrum fees is not very high. It's 20,000 rupees for a year, 20,500, but it is high for say a very rural community that is very resource poor. But say for an urban station it is not that much. I think the larger problem is that just the whole process of getting the license, renewing the license, getting the paperwork can be a little troublesome, even though in the last few years the government has been digitizing the entire process, bringing it all onto one portal so that your entire license situation is all on that portal. You can renew on that portal. So they are doing it, but it's a work in progress. So it is challenging. If there is a rural community that wants to set up a community radio station and they do not have a registered NGO, then they will first have to register an NGO, which is its own level of paperwork, and then run it for 3 years and have annual reports for 3 years and balance sheets for 3 years, and then apply with no guarantee that they will still get the license. So it is it's a challenging process. So in some cases, women are participating in radio quite well. That's also as a result of a bad practice, that women, because most NGOs are not able to pay a typical corporate market salary, they can only pay less. So women or young women sometimes are come because they want to work flexible hours, or they want to come in and work, so they are able to participate. For men, there's much more pressure to earn. So even though they have greater mobility to be able to come to the radio station and work or go into the field, after a while there's a pressure from the family to earn more. So then they go into setting up their own business, or joining something else. So there is that pressure. So you do have a lot of women. I think in many stations the problem happens that women are limited to the role of reporters, because it's easier for women to report on the women in the community, easier to access those women in the community. But very often that pathway to becoming a station manager is blocked, because there's already somebody there and that person is not going anywhere. So you do see that even when community radios get together, very often the station managers are men. There will be the few stations that will have women, and the station managers are men. The people in decision making powers, financial decision making powers in the NGO are men. So that kind of limits the mobility of women. But wherever there are women in decision making roles, you find that even the team has more women, because it is seen as a safe space for women to work in. Have women in decision making roles, and at every level. Be very flexible, despite the fact that broadcasting by itself is very demanding, in the sense a 9 o'clock show has to go on at 9 o'clock and a 10 o'clock show has to go at 10 o'clock. But to recognize that women have conflicting demands on their time. Children will fall sick, some festival is in the family, they are required at home, there's housework, whatever. So to be flexible and to put systems in place that if one person cannot come, somebody else can take up that task, which means that everybody in the team should be able to do everything. And when that flexibility is there, surprisingly women don't misuse it, and they appreciate the fact that they don't hesitate to call and say, my son is unwell, I need to stay at home for half a day to take him to the doctor. So I think that flexibility is extremely important. And also the third, I think, very important thing is that there need to be very clearly articulated systems in place, where the station articulates its rules and its systems for the station as a safe place inside the studio and in the field and on air. And that has to be articulated on air when community visits, when radio reporters go out, so that that message is very clearly spelt out, that any sort of attack or any sort of unacceptable behavior towards women broadcasters will not be accepted. There's zero tolerance. And that it also means about what language people use on air, or the kind of things people will say. So I think that has to be replied to and addressed immediately. There can be no delay, so that the women feel confident that if I'm feeling a little uncomfortable also, the organization will immediately join ranks to protect me. It's a dual-edged sword. So women like using the online space because it allows them to be recognized for their work and be seen. Their work is seen even by family members, when maybe little videos are put on air of them being on air or being in the field. But the downside is that you also end up getting stalkers, and you end up having people maybe misusing your photograph or misusing your video, and that's happened. So increasingly, for example, our own personal experience, we have an all women team. Our team is saying that we don't really want our faces. We want our work online, but we don't want our faces. So we've started shooting videos of our work happening, preparing, say for this interview, preparing without faces. Shoot from the back, shoot from here, and I think slowly that thing is there. The charm of being seen is wearing off, and the risks are becoming more visible. So increasingly we've started becoming more aware that the team doesn't want to be seen with their faces, which has also made us sensitive to the fact that when we are sharing photographs of the communities that we are addressing, that we need to be circumspect about sharing photographs and videos of women, children whom we may be sitting with and doing research or recording. Come on radio. I think it's the most empowering thing. 15 years of being in radio, that all women without exception, me included, you start hesitant, you start very stilted, you're not sure what to say, you're not sure how to say it. You are intimidated by experts, you're intimidated by male figures in power, female figures in power, because very often we are interviewing people in government. And over time, the confidence you get, and you just focus on your work, and I think you start working as, I am a radio broadcaster, that is who I am, and I don't care. You may be the commissioner of the city, I will ask you those questions, and I will walk into your room with a certain confidence. And these are very often young people, young women with just a school education. They haven't been to college, they're never likely to go to college, but you see that confidence. They go from very quiet and slightly mousy, and they just become so confident and strong, and those figures in power notice it. They always point it out that, oh my God, look at these women. But they haven't seen the change over years. So I feel any woman, it doesn't matter if you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a teacher, or you're going to be a painter, do radio, because I think it gives you that confidence to speak about yourself, your work, ask questions, and it's a medium that doesn't have an image. So you're not judged for how you look and how you dress, and your hair is okay.